Behold how good, how pleasing it is if brothers and sisters dwell together in unity. I wonder if this was what the Apostle Paul had on his mind when he was writing to the church in Corinthians. It's a simple but poignant beginning to Psalm 133, which you so graciously sang with me this morning in Hebrew. And when I close my eyes and read that psalm, I can't help but feel some kind of peace, or imagine what peace might look like. And if you close your eyes for just a minute, consider this psalm and think about what you might vision. Maybe you would vision children who are playing and laughing together in the neighborhood park. Maybe you would vision friends and family members who are gathered around a huge table, and they're laughing, and they're sharing memories and making new ones. You might even imagine world leaders who are shaking their hands and hugging one another, hopefully reaching a resolution. But regardless of what image that you can think about, I think the feeling you get is of peace, of warmth, of contentment. And it's a feeling as if all is right in the world. A feeling I think we experience when we realize we are not really alone. A feeling that we belong to something greater than ourselves and are connected to others who share our struggles. They share our joys, our doubts. They share our beliefs. And they share our grief as well as our love. And I think the people of Corinth, whom Paul was writing to, they understood that feeling and wanted to belong. They were new to Christianity, but were hopeful and excited to learn with Paul. You see, the city of Corinth, it was a port town, and it was on an isthmus that connected the lower part of Greece to Athens. So it was full of activity. There were merchants and travelers that were continually traveling through Corinth. So I think you can imagine the diversity that would be in that town. And there were wealthy, and there were many who were in poverty as well. It was founded as a colony for freed slaves and former Roman soldiers. It was diverse with different ethnicities, different faith practices, and different ideas about how the community should live and work. It kind of sounds familiar, right? Not too far down the road, maybe. And yet, in the midst of this diverse community, Paul has set up a church. He set up a church like he has done in so many other cities, from across the Mediterranean to North Africa even. But the church in Corinth is struggling. And Paul hears their struggles through word of mouth and through letters, and one letter in particular that he responds to in this text. And I'm not surprised there were issues in Corinth with all of those contacts and people in the same place, struggling to figure out who they were and whose they were. But Paul was never so busy that he couldn't take the time to write them a letter. And yet I am so curious about the letter that the Corinthians wrote to Paul. We don't have it, it's been destroyed, and I wonder what they would have said to Paul. What was really happening in that congregation? Why did they become so upset and feel they needed Paul to help them? Maybe it looked kind of like a Facebook group page, you know, where you can make comments and discuss what's going on. The first Christian church of Corinth. And here's Mary, and she posts near the Temple of Athens. At Paul, OMG! I cannot believe you made me take off my head covering on Sunday. Isn't that wrong? What are we doing here? Polonius, near the North Market, comments, really, Mary? Do you not get what it is we're doing here? Paul, I think you can back me up, right? And then maybe Priscilla, she's near the theater. At Mary, I thought we were both going to wear our matching head coverings because I bought them for us in Athens. Wouldn't that have been awesome? Thanks for leaving me hanging, BFF. P.S. Did you see the pic I posted about the Lord's Supper? Isn't it amazing? I think it's going in the National Gallery, but that would be too incredible. I can only imagine what that would look like, what the conversation looks like. And I think the comments that the Corinthians were making to Paul were about something greater, right? About this overall division they were experiencing in their church between those who were rivaling for leadership. They were looking for how to be Christian with one another in such diverse circumstances. Maybe they forgot what Christ had commanded and loving the God they love with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their mind, and loving their neighbor as themselves. Maybe they couldn't recall prophets' words like Zechariah. I'm going to go to Zechariah. It feels good. He had a poetic vision, right? And it's a poetic vision of a new Jerusalem. A new Jerusalem with a king who is humble and riding on a donkey. His command would stretch from sea to sea to all the ends of the earth. And it's a vision that sounds a lot like the one holy Catholic Church that we affirm in our creeds. Something that I think Paul needed to remind the Corinthians about. I think Paul also believed that because division was such a critical issue in Corinth, he needed to respond in a really careful way. Paul could see that the division and differences had the power to break down the community, and if not carefully taken care of, it could break the church down with it. A church that should be working together and affirming its creed as one holy Catholic apostolic church. As Beth was saying, we've been discussing these words or 4 marks of the church through our sermon series, and this week's word is Catholic, right? And when we use this word in our creed, it means universal. It comes from a Greek word, katholikos. It is often translated, though, as according to the whole. And I know when I was sitting in the pew as a young Sunday school student, and I said the creed, I'm wondering why we're saying we believe in the Roman Catholic Church. I'm a Presbyterian. Seemed a little awkward, right? But thankfully, my teachers helped me to see that this word Catholic actually had a greater understanding. An understanding of what it means to be a community of faith. To find things in common with one another. Things that were universal. Belief in God. Belief in Jesus Christ. And belief in a Holy Spirit who calls us to belong to this community. And he has given us gifts, all of us gifts, to build up our community and reach out to each other and extending the kingdom as Zechariah has described. So as we talk about what this word Catholic means, whether you think our church is universal or not, I'm wondering what you think the Community Presbyterian Church is doing to build up this idea of being Catholic or universal. Does anything come to mind? Do you think of something that this church is doing right now that is part of this vision of building up the church? Anyone?
Alternative gift market.
Alternative gift market. Absolutely. Really good point.
The meetings with all the church members, the separate meetings, trying to figure out.
Like the interfaith or just within the
4 meetings that the measuring tool.
Oh, the measuring tool. Absolutely. Absolutely. Taking time to meet with one another from whatever place you come and talk about the church. Absolutely. Any other things you can think of? I know you're on the spot, it's all good.
Youth group.
Youth group. Awesome. Yes. I agree. She said we should have it more. And you go out into the world and you do mission with one another, right? So by doing mission together and for another way, we are building up this idea of a universal or Catholic church. But there are still differences among us, right? Differences that those who were in Corinth wrote to Paul about. I wonder what our letter would say to Paul if we were addressing our differences. Differences that really tick us off and that we'd like to tell him about and get some answers. I know I would be really excited to have the chance to do that, because one thing that ticks me off in particular is how for as long as I can remember, we have been sending overtures to the General Assembly requesting that they resolve the ordination of gays and lesbians. It's a pretty intense issue, and so I totally understand why it takes a lot of time and effort to talk about this. It's important. And yet we have spent hours and days and years and dollars trying to resolve this issue. And I think it's important, but is that really helping us build up the church universal? Maybe. But I invite you to think about what else comes up to the table at General Assembly. Issues about dialogue between Palestine and Israel. Trying to combat world hunger. Those are just a couple of the issues that we struggle with. And I have to ask myself, are the differences we spend so much time worrying about, are they building us up or dividing us further?